They were holding me down, holding me back, holding me tight and close, breaking me down, riding my back, down on my knees and toes. But I got up and I became stronger than before. Heavy metal on my fist.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Spoiler Warning Podcast. This is review number 819 with a review of the Chronology of Water. I'm Christopher Schnese.
And I'm Stephen Miller.
And if you're joining us for the first time, the Spoiler Warning Podcast is a weekly film review program. Each week in the show, we're going to dive in, debate, discuss, and argue over the latest films coming to a theater near you. This week, we are talking about a film that will be coming to a theater near you, hopefully, early next year. We happened to see it at a screening that SF Film put on just this past weekend. Stephen and I, on one of the other rare times that is not a festival where Stephen and I got to sit next to each other and watch a film together. He originally caught this at Cannes, but we're talking about the latest film, the first directorial feature film from Kristen Stewart, The Chronology of Water, based on a memoir. Stephen, you have read the memoir. You read it after you saw the film.
Yes. Yeah, people can go back to my Cannes dispatch that I did from France and kind of rapid fire with you, where I said that I loved the movie and it felt like the book must be poetic, and I would try to read the book eventually. So I did make good on that promise. I did finally read a book.
And yeah, I mean, well, I guess we'll get into it in your review, how your recontextualization of your viewing may have played into all that kind of stuff. But yeah, and anything you want to say before we get started here?
I don't know. I guess this isn't the first time I have had a movie that I raved about out of a festival that I then told people you have to catch it when it goes wide, and then tried to like bring a group of people to watch it. And every time there's a little bit of fear that sets over for me where I'm like, what if I just had festival brain? and this is a very awkward experience. And I will admit that fear definitely set in this time, especially because, as we'll get into it in the review, not only is the subject matter of this movie quite difficult, but the filmmaking style is quite abrasive by design. Yeah. So just to say, even though I raved about this at Cannes, it was not a foregone conclusion that I would feel the same way a second time around. So I was almost afraid to watch it again because I didn't want to shatter the memory that I had when I was jet lagged and sleep deprived.
Yeah,
and watching it with French subtitles overlaid. Yeah. I guess that's all I'll say about it for now.
Yeah, I guess it's wildly different putting an opinion out on the internet and telling people you should see this movie than dragging like a whole boatload of people together and then sitting next to them while they watch this film.
Yeah. I will say, by the way, and I might be wrong, but I believe my Cannes experience back to back was watching Die My Love and then immediately going in to see this movie. Yeah. So it was quite a day.
Cool. Well, ready to get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's take a listen to the trailer for The Chronology of Water and then come back and give everyone a review.
Thought about starting at the beginning.
Oh, get her, Mike! Get her, Mike!
But that's not how I remember it. But that's not how I remember it. It's all a series of fragments.
Keep your head up!
Repetitions.
Smiley face.
Patterns, formations. There are moments.
Look at me.
Between years.
Look at me.
That surface with great force.
What? No one is big enough to hold what happens to us. No one's big enough to hold what happens to us. It's in your hands.
People say to me all the time, did the things in your stories actually happen? I don't know. Memories are stories. So you better come up with one you can live with.
So that was the trailer for the Chronology of Water. I'm going to go ahead and read the description here on IMDb. Through loss, love, and self-discovery, a woman transforms pain into art and writes a life on her own terms. Stephen Miller, what did you think of the Chronology of Water?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, I loved this movie out of Cannes for a while. It was my favorite movie of the festival until late in the game, the 1-2 punch of It Was Only an Accident and Sentimental Value came out and just barely edged it out. And watching it again, I still loved it. I see the abrasiveness of this movie even more now, especially because the theater that we were in had the sound cranked, I'm going to say like 30% higher than it needed to be.
It was a little much.
It was much, yes. It was a lot. And that I don't think is an artistic decision. I think it was just loud. It was hot in that theater, basically. But that did kind of underline for me the way that this movie is designed to unnerve you and jolt you. There are not that many extended sequences in the movie where you can kind of sit back and unclench. What I loved about this movie the first time around and still today is that I think it's a very daring movie, and not daring for the kind of superficial reasons that we can get into about the memoir and things that transfer from the memoir around sexuality or poetry being spoken, or there's a certain level of edginess that just comes with the territory. But what I think is daring here is this is a movie about, I think we can rip off the Band-Aid and say it because it's kind of the premise of the movie, about childhood sexual assault and violence that doesn't follow any kind of perfect victim model after presenting that information. This movie says, what does it mean to have been hurt in a completely unforgivable way, and then go on to fuck up and hurt other people and make all sorts of reckless decisions as you try to grapple with what you did. This is a premise that I feel like we've talked about before when it comes to abuse and the kind of cycle of violence, but I don't know if I've seen a movie take such a direct look at this will be the focus of the movie. It will be like, what does it mean to grow up in hardship? How can that be used to create art? And what are the kind of terrible casualties in the wake of that as you go through this time of life of trying to figure out who you are? And I just think this movie is very fucking bold for doing it. And it's something that I found extremely moving the first time around. And then the second time around, knowing it was coming, I was able to kind of just appreciate that and then pay more attention to just how it is constructed. Like, how does it divvy out its information? In my head, from the first time I watched the movie, it was much more time was spent in Lydia's childhood, in this very like tense cage of being stuck in this house with an abusive man and waiting to be free. That loomed really large mentally for me the first time I watched it. And watching it again, I was kind of surprised to realize how relatively little of the runtime takes place there. But you feel it all the time because the movie keeps referencing it. It keeps cross-cutting back into her childhood and trying to show kind of visually how new things going on in her life relate to those older experiences, and how like the specter of father looms really large, and the fear of violence, and like not having a voice and then suddenly wanting to use your voice. I don't know. I just think it is so interestingly constructed.
It's also slightly, your memory might be slightly affected by the fact that Kristen Stewart decides to have Imogen Poots play the character from like age 15 to whatever, yes, the final ages are in the film. So it's like, it's playing with the character is in this space, but is an adult woman playing a 15-year-old child. So it's like you're remembering the scene, but you don't know whether she was playing the older person present in the memory or the younger person being remembered upon. And honestly, I don't know if it's context switching in the middle of the memory sometimes.
I think it is. Yeah. But you're right. And I think that blurring is intentional. I mean, like this movie has so many things that are just like clearly built for me to love it. You know, I already mentioned the kind of the emotional rawness of what it's trying to tackle. Also the filmmaking style. You know, and Nickel Boys was my number one movie last year. That film was entirely point of view shots, and a lot of it had to do with disconnected fragments of memories that get weaved together and set over music to try to communicate a certain feeling, especially toward the end of Nickel Boys. And this movie has those hallmarks too, right? Like this movie is really it's fragments that are being kind of glued together to express a life. And there's a lot of things that are only there because of emotional similarity, right? There's a lot of stuff that goes unexplained, like the significance of rocks in this movie. It's something that is taken from the book, but the movie doesn't tell you anything about it. It just kind of shows you it and then cuts to a memory and cuts back to the person holding the rock. There will be a tense argument with like a romantic partner, and then it cuts back to a look that her mother used to give her. And it all is like communicating so much about like the push and pull between feeling silent and repressed and then feeling loud and angry to the point of being abusive, and how hard it is to kind of find a middle ground when you grew up in a time that didn't show you any kind of middle ground. I think the cast is just fantastic in this movie. Like Imogen Poots is just giving I think I used the word fearless when we talked before, and I would still stand by that. Like her portrayal of Lydia is unflattering, like intentionally so. It is a person who is like Lydia is frequently self-destructive and I'm gonna say up her own ass and fucking annoying sometimes, and she is more than willing to show it. This is not a movie that tries to put like a halo on the main character because of the terrible traumatic things that she endured. It's a movie that says like, hey, look at this person, warts and all, how she was hurt, how she hurt other people. Just look at her in like claustrophobic close-up, and Imogen Poots I think nails it. Jim Belushi is a like surprisingly tender figure as Ken Kesey, this real life author who became a sort of mentor to her for a period of time, and he's like, I would say, the one source of warmth that the movie gives you. And he's also deeply flawed, right? Like even in his warmth there are like multiple scenes where you're like, that guy seems a little bit fucked up, don't know how I feel about what's happening right now. But he just brings so much pathos to that role. And then I'm gonna say, in a very thankless performance, but Tom Sturridge as her father, I think, is just like... So, issuing a correction, now that I look at the cast list, Michael Epp is the actor who plays the father. Tom Sturridge is a young heartthrob who I'm sure plenty of people think is very ridiculous that I got the two mixed up. Tom Sturridge, I think, just plays one of her multiple boyfriends in the film. So Michael Epp is the guy who I think did a great job. He has to play this like intensely menacing figure who also is delusional enough to not know that he is menacing. And I think that's a really hard trick to pull off. And I believe him playing her memory of him and then also his delusion of who he is. And I don't know. I just think there's something really difficult about pulling off that balancing act. And I think he does it well.
You don't think he knows he's menacing in the memories?
I think in the moment that he's being menacing, he knows that he is. And then the moment he wants to be forgiven, he flips like a light switch and then acts like of course we are close, and of course I'm a good father. And like that's more the delusion that I mean, is like how you hold both at the same time. I don't know. I just think this is a really incredibly bold movie to make, especially as your first feature film, especially if you are a famous actress who is, most people who go out to see your movie are not going out to see it because they loved Personal Shopper, right? They're going to go out and do it because they love Twilight, or, you know, like they love the things we were known for. And this is a movie that is not going to please those fans at all. And I feel like it's kind of, it's a good, to me, intro to art house. And I mean that in like a positive way. It's like spoon feeding this really difficult style of filmmaking to an audience that I don't think will have seen it before. So yeah, I don't know. I have my quibbles. We can talk about those too, but I'm still very much a fan. Curious to hear what you think.
But Stephen, we watched this movie because we're fans of Personal Shopper.
Right. That's true.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an incredibly powerful film that I like. It's wild to me that this is like, I mean, I understand, like I've listened to a few interviews with her and stuff since, you know, obviously the interview while we were sitting in the room having just watched the film, but also other interviews with her after we saw the film. And I understand why she had to make this film. But it's wild to me that somebody would make this film as their first film. This is like taking 8 years to make a film that I assume is completely commercially inviable. Is just like a wild undertaking. But you can see the passion that went into this, and that this isn't, hey, I'm getting to make a, like, I don't want to throw any other filmmakers under the bus with what their first films choices to make are, but like, this is somebody who, like, I'm going to put literal blood, sweat, and tears into making a film that is exactly what I want, and you're either along for the ride or you're not along for the ride, or maybe you're along for the ride but you're just uncomfortable the whole time.
Yeah.
And I think that it's an incredible work. Liking it is a weird word to use. You know, like, this is not a film that you enjoy watching. This is a film that you appreciate the craft and appreciate the power of what it's doing. It's funny because, like, there's two sides to a coin of, she is telling a story that I have to attribute some praise to the story that she is writing based on the memoir. But also, you can tell that there is so much of her translation of the material, even though, even though it is like a direct translation of the source material, you can see the way she chose to but like the way she chose to put it to film. There's a lot of interesting choices there, and I'm compelled by what I'm watching. There is something that is a little bit interesting that is not. It's not a critique of what she's doing, but it's a thing that I question when I'm watching stories like this. Like, even the description on IMDb for this film is that somebody takes their pain, transforms it into art, and writes a life on their own terms. It's very specific wording of a life and their terms. And even in this trailer that we just listened to, there's a line of dialogue in the film where she's talking to people and they're like, hey, the stories that you write, are any of those true? And she's like, I don't even know. I'm just converting my pain that I have into art. And it makes you like, it's like she is technically an unreliable narrator, not to deny that she hasn't experienced pain and trauma, just that, like, the stories she's writing, we don't know whether they are direct translations of the pain and trauma she went through, or just her manifestation of the way that she wants to talk about the pain and trauma. So it's like, those things always make me like wonder about how I'm supposed to read certain things. But I think the film is really interesting how it like takes memory. It's like, it's playing with like three things at once, right? You have like memory, you have metaphor, and you have reality. And it's like, whenever we're talking about something, I don't know whether that was purely metaphor, whether it is a memory that is now being changed or manipulated, or being like addressed using metaphor, or whether it was a direct reality of something that was happening. But the way that we flash back and forth between things, and whatever the context of the moment is reflected back in time, and we see these flashes. It's like, you know, this film is a series of different acts, and at the beginning we kind of see the entire history of the film we're about to watch, kind of like flashes through different points in time out of context, and then we get all the context going forward as we see these different chapters in our life. And it's just, when you see the significance of what these moments mean, it like adds weight as you go forward. Sometimes the weight are a pile of rocks. Sometimes the weight are other things. But yeah, I think that this film is always compelling. Sometimes it's confusing in what I'm supposed to take from certain things or whether I'm supposed to believe or understand the metaphor. You talked about the pain she inflicts on other people in this film too, as she is dealing with her stuff. One thing I keep thinking about as I think back on the film since we watched it is, in some ways, she is the character that would be inflicted on the main character from other films that you would watch. You know what I mean? Like, she's the person that would come in and be a segment of somebody else's film. But instead, we're watching those segments in her life throughout the entire run of this film. And it's just like an interesting way to see the different worlds she steps into and how she affects those spaces. Ultimately, I said enjoy was a weird word, but it's like I appreciated my time with this film and I found it compelling. It's a weird one to like flat out straight up, hey, did you see anything this weekend? Oh yeah, you should definitely watch this movie, because the average person, the average person you're seeing, they'd be like, so I went to go see that with my,
are you okay?
But yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. It's interesting because they leaned in the Q&A a lot too into that thing you were talking about writing a life on their terms, and the idea of weaving your own story and the blurry lines, between is every detail true, or is every detail an expression of some feeling? And in a sense, it's funny because that kind of stuff occasionally feels like a cop-out to me. Like, it reminds me of Ethan Hawke in Before Midnight, where Julie Delpy is like, did you have sex with that woman while I was pregnant? And he was like, what does it even mean to be asking me this when and it's like, just answer the fucking question. But I think as an artist, it's like very true. And it makes a lot of sense, because this movie is basically saying, like, she's spending her whole life trying to find a way to express a feeling, and it's a feeling triggered by really, really, really hard things that happened to her, but that feeling wouldn't be communicated by just like giving bullet points of what happened. It's like, you try to create a feeling by putting together images or words or descriptions that will like combine to elicit it in the reader or the viewer. And it's like a kind of heady thought, but I think a lot of this movie is about Lydia trying to work out her voice, right? Her voice being like, what is it that I can express that I am maybe uniquely qualified to express, and how do I do it in a way that packs the most punch? And I think one feature of this movie and of the memoir that also can be a little difficult is it shows her working out that process as an artist, right? And I will contend that the growing pains of that artist it doesn't always produce great art, like we hear some poetry, some book ideas, some things that she's working through out loud. We learn about performance art that she was doing. And I think we are meant to see it as like, I know where this energy is coming from and you're trying to get it out, but you haven't quite found the voice yet, And I think this movie lets you sit in that like unpolished voice in a way that I imagine could be a little grating to people. Because if you watch this feeling like we are meant to think every word she utters is brilliant, I think this movie will let you down. Because I don't think Lydia believes that to be true when she writes the memoir.
It's like the poems in Patterson.
Yeah, exactly. I will also say the book I thought was beautiful in many ways, especially when it's dealing with her childhood and her early romantic relationships and kind of finding her way. The book, like a lot of memoirs, takes, I would say, some pretty self-indulgent detours into like, this is when I really learned to express myself. And there's a certain tone of the book sometimes that feels like Lydia is self-satisfied by how edgy she is, especially when it comes to her sexual liberation, that for me reading it in 2025, occasionally I'd be like, okay, I get it. You know, I'm proud of you, but this isn't as groundbreaking or edgy as you're making it sound in the moment. The movie, I think, actually does a much better job of balancing this stuff than the book. Like, I think the movie is one of those works of adaptation that I think is actually better than the memoir that it is adapting. Because in movie form, you can communicate all of that stuff about coming to terms with your body, becoming liberated, finding queerness, finding ways of expressing yourself, you know, dabbling in all these different things in a way that is more collage and less like making the reader sit through page after page after page after page of you discovering a lesson we already knew you were going to discover. You know, the book, the movie, I think, finds a way to do it all much more artfully. And I also had much more... I had a lot more patience, and I also found it more beautiful in the movie. Like, I'm going to give you the key example is there's a sequence in this movie where Lydia is in grad school, and she and two friends go away to the coast for the weekend. And in the book, that is written, you know, very... in a very flowery style, right? Detailing all the different ways that she like explored her body and found queer joy and all like themes that are beautiful. But the book kind of makes a point of trying to be like, look at how raw I'm being, look at how I'm describing every detail, look at it. And I remember in the book feeling like, okay, I get it. This is like the 20th time I've heard you describe like a sexual encounter. You know, I'm not necessarily feeling it that emotionally. Yeah. In the movie, because it comes, I would say, right after some heavy memories, like it's sandwiched between an otherwise very abrasive, heavy thing, it feels just like this really beautiful release of like, wow, there's a place that I can feel safe and gentle instead of being put up against this very like rough, brutal world. And it like, in the movie, even a second time, it made me feel really emotional. Like, you know, I think I got a little teary-eyed watching it. And in the book, I never in a million years would have thought that would be my response. So I feel like, and there's a bunch of examples like that where I feel like Kristen just kind of, she finds a way to be completely true to the book. Yeah. While also kind of knowing, here's how I can make this flow in a way that will hold the viewer more than like any memoir of enough length is going to be a little self-indulgent because things that are important to the author might not be important to your average reader. And I think Kristen does a really good job of bridging the art house with this movie isn't mainstream sensibility. Like you said, you wouldn't like recommend it to a random person and expect them to have a great time. Yeah. But I really think this would be a good like intermediate, I want to dabble into filmmaking that is a little bit more challenging, but I'm not ready to just like go full Rose of I'm trying to remember the name of that movie that we watched at Toronto.
Rose of Nevada.
Yeah, Rose of Nevada. I'm not ready to be fully eating my vegetables, but I want to have a movie that challenges me. And I think Kristen just, I'm just reading the book makes me even more impressed with how well she like completely nailed transposing it to a movie while also not having quite as much of the like baggage that comes with a memoir like that.
Yeah. And I'm really curious to like, not that we'll ever fully really know, but just to have an idea of like how much is not in the film. Like she in the Q&A, she referenced like how much stuff they had to shoot even though it was never going to be in the film because the characters had to have the context of understanding what that flash meant in the context of the other things. So you had to have the scene to represent the thing so that they can feel it for real even though we're not going to see it, but we can believe it through them. So like I wonder how much of the book like is like how many movies worth of movie did she film?
I'm curious. Yeah, I really wonder how much of it in the edit was when she decided the balancing act.
Because there was one weird line during the Q&A that like just like perked my ears up, and I was like, oh man, this is not a question for people, I guess, but she was talking about like, hey, I actually had like this version of the script pretty much locked for like the final 2 years, and it didn't really change in that time. And she said something that was like, and I know because I've been going through arbitration over it.
Yeah.
And like, to me, that mean like, I want to know what she meant by that.
Right.
And like, whether this is some sort of thing where it's like, hey, somebody wants to know what she's been spending this 8 years on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
I'm a little curious too. My ears also perked up for that.
So,
but yeah, I don't know. It was really interesting hearing that process. I guess I had never really thought before about how these kind of fragmentary, nonlinear stories actually get filmed. It didn't actually occur to me that they film full lengthy scenes, even though they know later they'll probably only find a few snapshots and pull it out. Like, in hindsight, it makes sense. Like, they talked in the Q&A that it would feel false if you just said, like, I'm going to film 2 seconds of you giving a look that seems emotional, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what kind of actor could pull that off. But yeah, it was interesting getting a window into the process. I also think this was one of those Q&As that, to me, it elevated my experience, not because it told me or anything about the movie. If anything, I think the answers were pretty, like, not totally hard to follow, but it was very rarely giving an answer that actually, like, illuminated anything. But I felt like the Q&A communicated Kristen Stewart's approach to art and her way of thinking about art and her way of talking. She basically talks the way this movie is edited. You know, she flows in circles and communicates things emotionally with metaphor while she's not describing it as a metaphor, and kind of goes back and forward and lands in a place that isn't answering the question but is communicating a thing that is relevant to the question. And there was something about it that, just hearing her speak live, I was like, oh wow, this is who you are.
Yeah. I really enjoyed, like, listening to her speak too, because to me, she is the perfect person to have in front of an audience, because there isn't a single thing somebody could ask her that would cause her to stumble and not be able to give the same level of effort response that she gave to a question that she asked herself, right, to start things. Like, she was just able to go for like 2.5 minutes on no matter what the question was, and I loved watching that kind of play out. It was like, damn, that's she's got that down. Yeah, for sure. I guess if I had to go into gentle criticisms of the movie, because I don't think it's perfect, especially on second watch, I feel like I caught a few things. One is, I think sometimes, even though I love the instinct to try to cut away detail and keep things just being emotionally connected through fragments, I think there are a handful of times where it does that unnecessarily. Like sometimes you want to have a movie that is like weaving together partial memories because the whole is greater than the parts, right? And sometimes I feel like the weaving together is trying to cover up the fact that it didn't have a lot to say in that moment. And there were a few times in this movie where I felt like you are editing this in a way that feels like you're making it look meaningful, but I don't really think you are giving me something. I can't pinpoint it, but there were maybe for every like 10 times it really worked on me, there would be one time where I'm like, this feels like you're just going for the style and not necessarily doing it because it's like the best way to convey a feeling. But is that not what the author was doing with their memoir?
Yes. Oh, it is 100% true to the memoir. Yeah. If anything, it is better than the memoir in the balancing act between those things. Because
to me, and this is, I did not read the memoir. This is just me as the person who has listened to a few interviews with the person and read the description on IMDb and watched the film and just recontextualizing
I've never
everything.
Heard Lydia speak about anything, by the way, so you maybe know more than me, even though I read the memoir.
No. Interviews with Kristen Stewart, just about her desire to make the film and then watching the film. And to me, the character is Lydia's voice for me. Like that's all I'm trying to combine things is to me, I think that is a conscious choice to have nothing be definitively true. Everything is just enough information that you couldn't deny this event took place, but it doesn't have to be the whole truth. It just has to be the gist of what happened so that none of it can be refuted, but also it's my internalized version of what took place there.
Right.
So, like, if you stuck with something for too long, then you'd have that information. But if you stick to partial memory or the stylized version of the flashback to the thing, then you have, and also the more times you return to it, if those gaps get shorter, then like you're losing the truth of the memory. You're having the feeling of the memory only. And I think it's like a conscious, like, you can, I'm trying to get away from the word lie, but it's like you don't have to, you can get to the truth of the feeling without needing to have like fact checked every little detail. So if you stay away from every single detail, then you can stick to the emotional truth without needing to have like a journalist fact check every line of your story and come back to you and be like, well, no, the shirt was red.
I definitely agree with that. And I'll give an example where I think that is really, really successful in the movie. And it actually is communicated more than I think. I don't remember the memoir leaning too much into the idea of questioning the truth or falsity. There are definitely times that Lydia does it, but I think the memoir just goes over enough chapters that you feel pretty confident that what you're reading is largely stuff that happened. But in the movie, there's an aesthetic choice where sometimes the cross-cutting happens within the same scene rather than from scene to memory. Like there's a moment where Lydia is reciting poetry. It's maybe the only time we get a really lengthy piece of poetry recitation happening. And it is filmed from two angles with two different warmths. Like the color palette is different. Like in one, the red looks really bright. In the other, it looks really muted, and it's shot at an angle. And
she's also delivering her performance, her character's the way her standing there reading the material as the character is also two different performances.
It's different. Exactly. So you're watching two different performances. In the text of the film, we can reasonably assume we're watching the performance, not that like she started giving this night after night after night and we're getting some kind of montage, right? But it cuts back and forth in a way to make you feel like, I don't know, one of these is her internal view of the performance. The other might be the external view. Maybe neither of them are internal. Maybe they're all story. And I love that. Like I think that is really interesting. And that happens a few times. It's kind of like how Spike Lee sometimes will have like a scene, an edit, where it then rewinds a little bit in the way that breaks the flow almost and reminds you that you're watching a movie that's being edited. I enjoy that. I think I don't have good examples of the times that I mean where I feel like it's cutting out more than it needs to. I guess one is I think the symbolism of rocks in the book are reiterated many times. And it isn't like this is what it means, but it gives you a little bit of space to kind of think about it. And I feel like in the movie, there's no reason not to do that other than just, to me, like wanting to make it feel so elliptical that you don't understand what you're watching.
Steven, I didn't not Google, is she actually eating the rocks?
But it's a minor nitpick, like in terms of the source material and it being a first film, I think this is remarkably not self-indulgent. Like I think most of the choices make total sense and are justified. I guess the other slight criticism I would have is like I really like the sound design of the movie. Hearing it being blasted way too loud did make me feel that occasionally the soundtrack gets a little repetitive. There's this kind of breathy chant type of soundtrack that it goes to a lot. The like ha 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 type singing. And again, there were a few times when I just felt like it was retreading emotional ground it had already tread. Again, minor nitpicks in a movie that I like adored, but those were two things that I just like I kind of held on to this time around.
So, some might argue that character retreads emotional ground.
Yes, you certainly could argue that. And again, the memoir retreads ground so much more. And by the way, when I criticize the memoir, I'm not trying to say that there isn't value in having your memoir talk about in unflinching detail your sexual awakening and the kind of learning how to own your body and the kind of pendulum swings that happen when you feel like you had no control and now all of a sudden you're going to, swing as hard as you can in the other direction. Like that, it's all totally valid. You can do it. What I'm really talking about that I didn't always love in the memoir is there were a lot of lines that felt like it thought it was being edgy just by talking about pussies or cum or something.
Yeah.
And that, to me, today, rather than in like the 90s when the poems that I think she eventually turned into this 2011 memoir were first written and her voice kind of got established, today that doesn't strike the same way. And that's more what I mean by indulgence, is like it felt a little samey in an attempt to have shock value rather than in mining the actual emotions that she was trying to get to.
Yeah. Cool. Should we get to verdicts, Stephen?
Sure.
All right. Stephen Miller, if you were going to give us a must-see, recommend with a caveat, wait for rental, pass with a caveat, or a must-avoid, what would you give it?
I am giving it a must-see with a very implied caveat, an asterisk that you already gave before, which is this is a difficult movie, right? This is not a movie that is a pleasant sit. This is a movie that, especially if your theater is blasting it at too high a volume, is really jarring and arresting. But I think it's a must-see because I just think it's beautiful. It's, to me, an amazing work of adaptation. I doubt this movie will really get nominated for anything, but if it does, I hope it is adapted screenplay as a kind of catch-all for the feat of adapting this into a movie, visually, sonically, everything. I just think it's really amazing and an amazing first feature from Kristen Stewart. So I love this. It'll definitely make my top 10.
It's a recommend with a caveat for me. I think it's a powerful film. I really am appreciative of what she did. It's been living in my head for a while. We were in the lobby afterwards and we're like, so is this what our review is? We hadn't fully locked in what our review was, and I was like, yeah. I was like, my brain was still going, having just exited the theater, but I think it's worth a watch. The caveat is a big caveat though, because it is a lot, but I think that a lot that it is pays dividends if you're able to sit there and vibe with it. Probably isn't the right word, but if you're just able to let it wash over you, like water does,
yeah,
then you might get a lot out of it. But yeah, that's going to do it for our review of the Chronology of Water. Stephen Miller, if people want to find you throughout the week, where can they do that?
People can find me at Blue Sky at sdavidmiller or sdavidmiller.com.
People can find me at ChristopherInRealLife.com or Christopher IRL on a number of social platforms. You can find the podcast over at thespoilerwarning.com, where you can get a bunch of the back episodes of the show. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do so on Overcast, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are found. If you want to know when the episodes go live, you can follow us at twitter.com/spoilerwarning, facebook.com/thespoilerwarning, or instagram.com/thespoilerwarning. If you want to get a hold of us directly, you can send an email to fans@thespoilerwarning.com, or you can use the contact form on our site. Music for this episode will come from a track selected from artlist.io, so hopefully you're enjoying that. We're going to take off now. Next week, we're going to have a review of Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery. And the week after that, we're going to have a review of
Avatar,
Fire and Ash, new Avatar film. And then after that, we're going to be traveling and stuff for the holidays. And then we'll be back in January with probably an end of year recap, and should be fun.
Yeah.
All right, take care, everybody. We will see you next time.
Bye.
It's another round, it's another song, dance until you black out. If you ever feel like you don't belong, time to put your hands up. It's the only place where we all come from, dance until you black out.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends.
Keep it in the podcast.
You never know what you're going to get with a YouTube download.
Yeah.